Chap.9-10, a bargain hard and find the black swan. So Steve, I will let you take it away, my friend.
Well, chapter 9, now because I'm a forerunner guy by nature, that's my favorite. The beginning of chapter 9 is like my favorite part of the book, is his story about going and haggling for the forerunner. It's by far just it ties a whole bunch of stuff together that he does and everything. But this is when it's like, this is when it's showtime. Like, we have learned and learned and learned and learned, and now it's showtime. And the hard thing for a lot of people is a lot of people are not raging D personalities like Laura Lerman. You know, we are not all gifted like Laura, where we could just kick somebody's door in and, you know, scream their face off their body, you know?
Listen.
I'm just saying. I mean, I'm saying it's a bad thing.
I'm nice before I start screaming. I give them the opportunity to behave correctly.
Your husband in the office, will your husband sign off on what I said? No. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to be sure.
He might.
Okay.
He might.
No, but I mean, but the reality is, I mean, the negotiation, that's the hard part. That's the part where everybody gets like nervous and whatever. But what this chapter goes over is the fact that, I mean, we have to remember, negotiation is not necessarily just beating somebody up and trying to get our way. It's, you know, it's having them realize that they got our way. But it's a way of coming together and figuring stuff out, creating solutions, moving the ball forward, things like that. So that's what this, you know, and obviously they talk about the Ackerman plan being one of those, you know, like a tactical way of getting to a number. But this one is really it just kind of brought everything together. And the more I listen to this book and read the book, like, the more little nuances I pick up as far as like what I'm doing wrong. I just find it
yes.
So Laura, I kick it to you then.
Well, that was something that was a big aha for me through the whole book. And to your point, negotiation, like, I was just on the phone with an agent last night, and she's like, we're looking at 4 houses. Oh, like, it was such a used car salesman mentality. When I got off the phone, I was like, I don't even want to do a deal with you, because all you're going to try to do is strong arm and run over my client. And, well, I'm a high D, so that's not going to work at all. Ever not going to work. And being a high D, that is probably my normal personality, right? To strong arm people. And so as I returned an item on Sunday and found out that the store only had a even exchange or gift refund policy, like they won't refund your money. Okay. Just so you all know, I put the book in place. I did not argue. I didn't even yell at the lady and tell her her policy was stupid for consumers. I was quiet. It was like, how do you want me to feel spending $1,000 in your store and you won't return $75? How am I going to shop at your store again?
Good question.
And then I shut up and I didn't say another word. 3 minutes later, 3 minutes. $75 was back in my account. She's like, I'm really sorry you had this experience. And it was all her fault. I walked out and almost peed myself laughing.
You said, that's right.
There was like 3 or 4 other things I would have happily spent the $75 on.
Right. But
I never had to get mad. I never had to yell. I never had to. And she was so remorseful at the end. And nobody walked out and going, well, she was a bitch. They were like, oh my God, I felt so sorry for that lady. She spent all this money in the store and all she wanted to do was return 1 shirt. And our policy almost stopped her from shopping here.
But you turned your problem into her problem by asking the right questions, which is the whole point.
Yes. So yeah. I love the fact that it takes the perspective from, you don't have to be an asshole. You really don't. Being an asshole actually is a hindrance over. That was a big aha moment for me in this book. And I think chapter 9 kind of solidified that a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, I would say so. When he kind of pointed out, it's not a problem with the person across the table from you. It's just the situation. It's just, what you're trying to get to. It almost kind of, I don't know. It kind of takes like the whole situation and turns it into something else when you think of it that way. And it's like you're not arguing with somebody. You're just, trying to get them to see your way. So I don't know. That was kind of the biggest aha moment to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, it keeps things business perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I say all the time,
Mm-hmm.
y'all, when I coach my agents, this is not personal to you.
Right.
Don't be one of those agents where if you don't get your list price, you take it as a personal slap in the face. It's business. Like it's all business. And I think that's, without saying it's business, I think that was kind of the perspective of it's not personal. Just have a conversation.
Right.
Alicia, you got anything to add?
I enjoyed hearing in I think it was chapter 9, about the different profiles. I haven't done the disc profile thing yet, but it was really fun to hear the 3 A's. I am very clearly one particular type. And so it was fun to hear his elaboration of what silence means for each person. And so that was really cool because I know what silence means for me. And as a consumer, it's a very hard boundary, my silence. And so, and my husband is not the type I am. And so it was fun to hear that, like, we're not crazy. Like, not that we're crazy, but that when I go silent, he starts talking. And so it was fun to hear like a legitimate reason behind why that starts happening. So that was fascinating for me. I mean, I once spent, I want to say it was 3 hours on the phone. We had switched from DirecTV to Dish to get some sports package we didn't have to record the World Series playoffs or something. We went somewhere, we came home, and the recording never started. And so my husband was like, this is the only reason we moved to Dish. It didn't work. The product we paid for didn't work, blah, blah, blah. So he gets on the phone, he starts very calmly like, hey, I want out of my contract. Here's what happened. And the guy's like, not my problem. You're in a contract. Too bad. And I'm like, this went on for maybe 20 minutes. And I'm like, would you like me to talk to him? So I get on the phone and I said the same thing, very calm. I sat on the phone with awkward silence. I'm telling you, 3 hours when I hung up. It was more than 3 hours of like, no, I understand, but we got Dish to record the game and the game is not there. And at the end of the phone call, he let us out of our Dish contract. And my husband was like, what? So it does work. It is about the patience. I appreciated the story too, back in chapter 5 or 6, where there's like a group of 3 robbers inside and they don't say anything through the door for 6 hours. Mm-hmm. And so when my husband caught up to it, he's like, he sat there for 6 hours. And I'm like, yep. And it worked. So it was validating for me that like I'm not crazy, and the people who are not like me are also maybe not crazy, but just different, and how to navigate that.
And the best part about that story was that when they got him out of the thing, they told him, the reason we came out was because we realized you weren't going to leave. And part of it, that's probably what the person on the phone says, like, well, she's not going back down. She's going to
sit. I can't hang up.
She's not going to hang up. She's not going to do it. She's going to sit there. I mean, we may as well do this because I can't sit here for the nenext 6 hours doing this.
Right.
So.
Well, and when you negotiate that way, I feel like nobody's angry on the back end.
Right.
Because it's the worst to sit at a closing table and know that the other side has called you a dick like 12 times. Like it's not fun. I mean, you're sitting there and you're like,
says you. I love those closings. I had one man. I walked in there like the Pied Piper, man. That guy called me an a-hole and everything. But I won. I won. I walked in there and my suit looking all smiling chipper. Kiss my ass. Sorry.
Oh, you're
Anyway,
so funny.
But the assertive, because what were the three? The accommodator, the assertive, and the analyst. So that kind of goes with the DISC profiles, the D, the IS, and the C, basically.
Well, it does, and I think it's actually sometimes it's hard to sum people up quickly, because if you look at my DISC profile, my I is actually higher than my D on the test, but my personality, my D is higher at 1,000%. The test is wrong. The end. In there, we're talking about higher, like like this high, right? So somebody who is very versed in the DISC profile, most of them are going to tag me as a D, but some people may tag me as an I, right? Like if you really know my personality, you see the I come out in me. And I think when you take these three categories, you're like, okay, is this person analytical? How are they? If you watch how they respond to the silence, you don't have to know all of the ins and outs of the DISC profile. So for me, this kind of dumbed that down a little bit. And I actually think it made it easier to put that evaluation in place than actually evaluating people on the DISC. I think it was a much easier evaluation for a novice person who doesn't really understand or know as much about the DISC as, say, you and I, Steve.
Right. Okay. Let's see. The other thing in this, what was the other one? Talking about being ready to take a punch. Because we'll run into a really good negotiator. And we have to be ready. And part of it is we have to be prepared for it. And as a realtor, it's kind of hard because we don't necessarily know what we're negotiating. Because sometimes we may just get a call out of the blue from somebody who we want to list with and wants to talk about the price. Or sometimes we get a call out of the blue from a buying agent on one of our listings and say, so we don't have time to be super prepped. You know what I mean? It's not like we have a boardroom that we're getting ready for 3 hours ahead of time. Right. Sometimes the listing appointments. So, I mean, what do y'all see with that as far as being prepped and getting punched in the face and kind of just being ready for negotiating?
Well, I think it's important to consistently stay on your toes, because I think it was chapter 9 where his tactics were used against him and his kid laughed at the table, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that, part of that is, and that, to me, it kind of spills over into chapter 10, where they start talking about the black swan and not being prepared and having those outliers out there. To me, where you can combat that is your script practice and just kind of reliving those moments, like they talk about in chapter 10 a ton, having multiple people listen to those conversations. Well, Mike Price and I have actually talked about starting to record anytime we're coaching agents, right? Anytime we're recruiting, anytime we're coaching agents, for two reasons. One, that agent can then go back and listen, right? So you've got that second, because you're going to hear something a second time. And B, I can go back and listen because I can watch the agent and listen to myself a second time. So I think when you're trying to avoid those sly, side moving in situations where the person just kind of slides in or punches you in the gut, however you want to look at it, I think it's really being a very assertive listener from moment one, so that you can catch all of those simple hints that they throw in there as to what may be coming. Because the bottom line is if you listen and pay attention, the clues are always there. The clues are never not there, right? I talked to 2 agents yesterday for 2 different properties, and actually talked to 3. I've got 2 on a listing making offers. So I've got a little bit of a bidding war right now going on a listing, which is great. But immediately I knew exactly who I wanted to talk to because I was work with, because I was so cognizant of what they were saying and how they were saying it.
And that came from probably asking a boatload of questions and shutting the hell up. And so, because I want to be aware of time, because I do want to do kind of like a big wrap just on the whole thing. So we're going to kind of ducktail into.
We ain't doing nothing because he's frozen.
Yeah, he froze.
I don't know what y'all see, but that's what I see.
That's what I see.
Oh, poor Steve, poor Steve. His baby
Well,
probably.
Steve.
I'll say a
Don't
little
talk.
something. Oh,
There I am. And then I get a little thing that says my internet connection's unstable. It's like, thank you, Zoom. I appreciate it.
But the good news, Steve, is we didn't lose you. You didn't black out. You look like this for like 30 seconds.
I did that. I was like, if I'm going to get frozen, I may as well look good. So I'm going to go.
There you go. There you go.
So the Black Swan, the magic bullet, the stuff, the unknown that we are trying to get to. What were y'all's thoughts reading this chapter? What were y'all's thoughts that this is kind of the chapter that brings it all together, brings it all home?
So good.
So the Black Swan, I feel like it's no matter how many times I read it, I guess I have a harder time kind of correlating this to like maybe experiences, kind of identifying situations where maybe I identified a black swan or maybe even I gave away a black swan. This one's really just interesting though to me, kind of breaking down the concept of, things that we know versus things that we know we're not going to know versus things we know we're not going to know at all. I don't know. It was the Black Swan is just it's interesting to me.
Well, for me, the Black Swan shows up a lot of times because you don't ask enough questions. You take that last situation where the guy stands at the window basically asking to be shot, and they go back and they don't connect the dots that he killed his mom in the home or whatever before he left and went into the bank and all that kind of stuff. And I think that, I reiterate consistently in coaching, agents will come to me and go, what do I do with this? I immediately have a question. 100% of the time, they don't know the answer. 100% of the time, they don't know the answer, right? So my immediate response is go back and find out and then ask more questions. And so I think it was a very eye-opening moment. I never want to be in a situation where someone's pressed against a door, figuratively speaking, looking for a bullet, right? And I think the best way to alleviate that, and it was such an eye-opening, like, oh my God, they probably could have gotten to this response and probably potentially could have even saved this person's life and saved the lady's life in the bank that got shot, had they realized, one, made the connection that this person really had an agenda and the agenda wasn't money. They didn't know that before the shootout. They had no clue. And so I think that it was, to alleviate that, and you're never going to alleviate all of them. There's always going to be surprises in life, but it takes me back to my scout days where, we're supposed to be prepared for any situation. And that's how my mind has been programmed to think for 10 years. And two, making sure you're asking those questions and you're getting the data that you need, and then going back and re-listening and revisiting that data, even in the split second after it happens, to alleviate confusion or question. Because I think any situation could have a black swan.
Right.
I heard kind of two things. I like the way David phrased it. I also feel like I myself am a black swan sometimes. Like I don't fit into what everyone's expecting in terms of like being a consumer. So I'm glad you said that because I thought that was a little weird, but I'm glad you felt that way too. And then the second thing is I feel like in real estate that potentially there aren't really that many black swans left. I know that like 2020 itself was a black swan. but it wasn't something that any one of us had to figure. I mean, we were all figuring it out, but not necessarily on our own. And so like once it's figured out, it's kind of out there. So in the history of real estate, how many buyers are or sellers are like another? A lot of them. And so I feel like maybe there aren't that many secrets left to be discovered in terms of real estate for me. But at the same time, like Laura was just saying, any one thing could make it blow up. So I guess the definition of black swan in a real estate transaction could kind of shift. So I would definitely want to reread that section again, since we only had like 4 days or 5 days this time instead of 7. I probably would have gone back and listened to that whole section again.
Well, this book you will revisit all the time. You know, we should listen to this book at least once a year. In real estate, it's all about pain. And I think in any sales, it's about pain. They've got a pain. And what I learned in my old sales, before I was in real estate, my old sales training through Sandler, it's all about, you got to figure out the pain, and you've got to go third level on the pain. Because the pain that they tell you is never the pain. You know, why do I want to move? You know, we just want something new. You just want something new? Tell me more about that. Whatever. And you go, whatever. And whatever they say there, that's not the truth. And it's about picking at the layers and picking at the layers. Like the story I told you last week, my sellers that I've got that are moving to Colorado and they didn't know. All of a sudden they let slip that their son's getting a divorce and they need to be out there pronto. And that needs to be front and center every time we talk, to say, look, you know, I know that you're trying to be sure everything's going whatever, but I want to be sure I can get you to Colorado so you can get to your son and help take care of him. Keep the pain on the front burner. Like once you know the black swan, once you know the real motivation, I mean, if it's a doozy, put that on the front of the car. You know what I mean? And we're going to lead with that all the times. Not as a way of necessarily like taking advantage or whatever, but like we're paid in sales. That's our job.
Well, the prize, your eye always has to be on the prize, and the pain is what gets you there, right? And it's your job to keep the client remembering that, because your job's to be professional, their job's to be emotional in any negotiating. Right. They are the ones that it happens to, whatever it is.
Right.
I feel like the lesson that I kind of learned from this book every time I read it is like, you know, so one, he kind of talks about at the beginning, it's like that slow down. And then I feel like he reiterates in bargaining where, you know, he kind of just sits through that pain of, I forgot what he called it, you know, like where he's just haggling with the other guy. And so for me, it's like, I feel like I need to remind myself every time. So I'm on the analyst side. So usually when I get quiet, it's totally because I'm thinking something. You know, I'm like, okay, well, what's my next question? What did they just say? And how does that get me to, you know, what does that mean in the whole, you know, scheme of things? And so when I get quiet, obviously, you know, the quietness, you know, can be a little awkward, painful. And so for me, as soon as I thought of something, I'm like, okay, cool. We don't have to wait. We don't have to sit in this, you know? And so I've gotten lucky over the years because I'm thinking. If I'm with a, you know, like one of the other two A's, it's like, okay, well, he's mad, or, oh, no, I need to say something. And so all the time I'm just getting information I never really asked for because of that. But I think this kind of reiterates too, is just like, don't be afraid to kind of sit in that pain of silence, or just, you know, slow things down, or even just, you know, to your point, you know, ask more questions. You know, just ask more questions, because I feel like the worst thing that'll happen is you'll get more information.
So as we start, Laura, it's been fun having you in the book club. Before you choke out, any last thoughts about?
God, I don't know what just happened. But I was going to say something on David's point. You know, to asking more questions. I say all the time to the agents that I coach, like, what's the worst thing if you ask another question? You're not going to get shot. You're going to get told no.
Right.
Right. Like that's literally the worst that can happen. So I'm going to get a hat that says, my name is Captain Question. And I'm going to live my life only asking questions. How does that sound?
How are you supposed to do that?
How am I supposed to do that?
How am I not supposed to do that?
That to
My
me,
thought
that's,
was, oh my gosh, you'll be like a 2-year-old. Why, mama? Why? And I'll stop talking to you.
Well, but you can't ask why. Remember in the
Ask
book,
why. How or what.
yes, how or what. You can't ask why.
Okay,
But
I'm going
I
to tell you that when I come to your office in 5 minutes and you say, well, why do they want to move? I'm going to say, you can't ask me that.
Like
Right?
it.
You guys heard it. You heard it.
It's too funny. I'm actually glad they brought up the why question. I don't know if we've talked about that a lot in any of our discussions. But to your point, Alicia, you say you're gonna be like a kid and ask why. That was eye-opening as to why I got so aggravated when a kid looks at you and goes, why? It's not the questions, it's not the fact that they're asking the questions. It's the fact that they're asking it in a way that's aggravating. Like, I was like, oh my goodness. And so now the word why is no longer allowed in my vocabulary. I don't like the word why, and I don't like the word but.
Now, like he said though in the book, I mean, if you calculate it correctly, you can use why. For example, if we're talking to for sale by owner, and they tell me about the house, blah blah blah. Great question that we like to ask them is, oh my goodness, look at the pictures and what you told me. That house is awesome. Why would you ever want to move if the house looks like that? And then that's their way. Instead of saying, so what makes you want to move your house? If you ask it like that with that why, this that way it's not accusatory. It's more of like almost like a compliment. Why would you ever want to do something like that? Your house is awesome.
Right.
And then here comes the pain. Here comes the pain train. You guys be ready to listen.
I like that term.
The pain train. That's what my hat's going to say. The pain train. So to me, because now that we got about 9 minutes left. Last thoughts about this book. This time reading it, to me, because it's funny how when we read these books, things start happening in life that like mirror the book. And like I said, I went to the training class last week, and what was the big talk? Everybody talked about empathy. And to me, that's my thing that I'm going to take away from reading it this time, is that I need to be better about being empathetic. Because, Laura, it's the same way, because I know you're trying to build your business big and adding new divisions and blah, blah, blah. I know everybody's got their own thing going on, but we also have to stop and pause and listen to, which sometimes, because I'm kind of a newer D personality. Now that I'm kind of solo, it's like you have to be a D, otherwise you won't make it. So I'm still kind of getting used to being a D. I have to remind myself.
It's not hard.
Just run the walls. Don't ask for permission. But I got to remind myself, slow down. This has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with them, And so to me, that's going to be the biggest thing I take back away from this book this time reading it and listening to it is empathy.
So I like how you're concluding this. This is actually the direction I was hoping we would head from this book moving forward, because my goal at the end of each book is for us to take away between 1 and 3 ahas and what are you going to implement in life for your business, right? Because you're not going to implement it all. Heading back to chapter 10, you're going to miss part of it, right? You're not going to hear all of it. You got to listen to it many, many, many times. I think every time you listen to it or a training of any sort, you're going to hear something new, right? So something I've started implementing every time I go to a training, every time I go to something, instead of trying to implement everything, which is overwhelming and impossible.
Right.
I'm trying to pick out the things that I feel will do one of two things. Either A, make me a better person, business owner, mother, but it's going to increase me and my productivity and my level of whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish. So that's kind of the first thing. And then two, what's going to make me the most money, right? What is going to get me financially free the quickest? The quicker I'm financially free, the quicker I can pour into other people. That's a fact. As soon as I'm not in production, I can help that many more people. 3 hours yesterday showing properties could have been 3 agents that I was coaching. And so for me, the biggest ahas there are, I think I'm actually okay with being empathetic. I don't always show it, but it's something that I'm actually decent with. Sometimes I don't care is the problem, right? I understand your pain, whatever, but so I'm going to focus a little bit more on actually acting on that and not just being cognizant of it. So I think that was a huge takeaway. And the silence for me. Like, I got the fastest talker award in 5th grade, and it has not changed since. And I think that for me is like, silence is golden. The movies are right. So that's kind of what I'm taking away. I think I already asked a lot of questions. I was already relatively decent at that point. And so for me, that's the 2 implementations, is just listening better and showing that I'm empathetic, not just going, okay, well, I can see their point, but I don't give a fuck. Like, actually, making it look like I do, or communicating as though I at least understand where they're coming from. I think that makes a big difference in negotiating. I think if the other side feels like you get it, but you can't, then they do.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be that just, sitting in that silence, and then kind of pushing through the pain, and then so being more strategic with my questions. I think I've always been relatively good at asking questions. I think this book has kind of almost like a framework, if you really dive into it, of really how to ask good questions. So that's really just going to be me focusing towards, how I'm asking my questions, sitting in that silence, and yeah.
Okay.
So,
Bring us some, Alicia.
Yep. So one of my main takeaways is I'm not primarily an auditory learner, and so I did this whole book audiobook. So I want to carve out time to go back and actually look at the pages of the book that we have. That's how I retain it better. So I want to do that and make notes that I can keep with me. But I also think I'm pretty good at asking questions. I also think I get at least an A on the empathy part. My takeaway is how to ask the questions. No more yes or no's. Very pointed questions to make them come up with a specific answer, even though they don't know they're doing all the work. Another takeaway for me is that I know that I'm going to be an awesome realtor, but to hear it from like the business side, it was great to be reaffirmed that like my personality already suits a lot of these things that he's trying to get people to do or understand or even know about. And so I'm excited that I'm already mostly programmed for that. And so I'm ready to hit the ground running with a lot of what he said. I feel like I would get a good grade as a student in his style.
Just so y'all know, she's already hit the ground running. Don't let her blow smoke up your ass.
Well, woe is me. I hope I do. Laura's not going to let you get away with that.
No, it's going to be awesome.
She comes in every day. She leads in a rage. She's on the phone. She's killing it. Okay, let's just call it a spade.
Then let's go.
Let's just call it a spade.
At one point, make a person rich.
Is that everything? Because we have about 2 minutes, and I'd like to discuss the next book. Or do you have any more, Steve?
I'm good. Love the book. I'll listen to it every year because there's a lot of stuff that needs to be remembered or reminded. And how am I supposed to do that?
So for me, this is going to become a travel book. I like to find a book that's short and sweet, a couple hours long. You can watch when you listen to while you go to the beach and you're just laying there.
Got it.
And I like the fact that each chapter, you can pick up each chapter and not be lost. Like if I'm like, oh, I want to do this, I can listen to, just chapter 1. All right. So next book, I have a question. Hold on, let me move this. I've got 2 pulled up. So I have been working very hard over the last couple months, probably the last 12 months, maybe even 18 months on time management. And just time blocking and getting all that kind of situated where it should be. So there's actually 2 books that have been recommended for time blocking or kind of getting your schedule straight. No BS Time Management for Entrepreneurs and The Miracle Morning. They have a couple miracle mornings. There's actually a specific one for real estate agents. Have you guys read either of those? Does anybody have a preference on either of those?
I read Miracle Morning, good book, but I know Dan Beer pushed No BS. That I would love to read that.
That's the direction I was more heading, but I kind of was looking at my titles and I figured I'm going to read both of them. So I'm good with either one. So Alicia and David, do y'all have a preference?
Yeah, that's Dan Kennedy, right?
The No BS?
Yeah.
I'm
fine with that one.
Dan Kennedy. Bam!
Yes, Dan S. Kennedy, correct.
I'm fine with that one.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
there it
that's
is.
good. Let's do it.
All right. No BS Time Management for Entrepreneurs. Let me download it. I haven't downloaded that one. But I'll send out an email or a thing on Modern Agent with what chapters we'll go through, but I'll keep us around the 2-hour mark. Does that work for everybody?
Works for me.
Awesome. Well, Steve, you killed it. Thank you for being our fearless leader. The next book will be me.
Steve.